A few years ago, I went on a trip to Israel, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. We did so many really amazing things and visited so many places that are mentioned in the Bible. We got to walk some of the paths that Jesus walked and saw a lot of the things that Jesus would have seen. But we also did a pretty odd thing. One day for lunch, we ate something called St. Peter's fish. Now, it really was just tilapia, which is a pretty common fish, and I'd eaten tilapia before, but I had never eaten it quite like this. They cooked the entire fish, head, tail, everything, the whole thing. It was such a unique experience to be sitting by the Sea of Galilee and eating something called St. Peter's fish, while the poor fish was basically looking at us. But we did it, and it was pretty good. As we continue our story today, we're going to learn about someone who did some pretty odd things. A lot odder than eating a whole fish. God told Elizabeth and Zechariah that they would have a son, and they did. He told them to name their son John, and they did that too. As John grew up, his parents reminded him over and over and over again about the promises that God had made about him. The promise that he would prepare the way for the king that would bring God back to earth. And at night, they would sing that special song. God couldn't remain, sin drove him away, but now he has heard what we've hoped and we've prayed. God is coming to earth to stay. From the moment John was born, well, really before he was born, John had something really special about him. It was some kind of spirit, and John knew that the spirit was there to help him prepare the way for the king. Remember I told you we were going to learn about someone who did some pretty odd things? Well, that person is John. The special spirit in John's life had something to do with the odd things that he did. He did odd things like only wearing clothes that were made from camel hair. I don't know if you've ever touched a camel, but it's definitely not the softest thing in the world. I would much rather only wear things that were made from sheep's wool, but I'm not John. He did odd things like living in the wilderness with the wild animals. Don't get me wrong, I mildly enjoy camping, but I don't want to live in the wilderness. And then John did other odd things too, like snacking on grasshoppers covered in honey. Grasshoppers in honey. Honey is good, but I will pass on the grasshopper. And here I thought eating an entire fish was odd. John was different from his friends. He was different from his family, but God was with John. God was with John while he was wearing his uncomfortable clothes, living in the wilderness, eating bugs. And people could tell that John was different. They could see that God was with John. So God's people would go into the wilderness to hear what he had to say. Every day, John gave the same message to the people. It was a message that said, God has something to say. Open up your ears to listen. Open up your hearts. God is sending a king who will make the wrong things right and the dark things light. God is sending a king who will bring God back to earth to stay. Every day it was the same message, and every day the people came to listen. John even began baptizing people in the Jordan River. The act of baptism reminded the people of all the times that God had been so good to them, all the times that God had saved the people by bringing them through water, bringing them through hard times, like when God saved Noah and his family, or when God brought the people out of Egypt, or when God brought the people back to their home after years and years of living in a foreign land. Then one day, as John was baptizing people, John saw him. He saw the man who would come to change his life forever, the man who had come to change the entire world forever. Was it the king? Was it Emmanuel? It was. John saw the king. But before that king was a man, he was a boy. Before he was a boy, he was, well, a tiny little baby. John spent many years in the wilderness waiting for the king. And as he waited, he would hum that song that his parents once sang to him. God couldn't remain. Sin drove him away. But now he has heard what we hoped and prayed. God is coming to earth to stay.